Anyway, I'm really happy to be back among the biotremology crowd since my last visit. I think it's 6 years ago, and since then my interest changed a little bit. From my first research in vibrational communication of steam bugs, I'm now more into their semiochemicals, but not specifically steam bugs, but more of the cerambicids, the longhorn beetles. I'm interested in the chemical structures of their sex and aggregation pheromone, and particularly in their behaviors associated with the production of these pheromones. I look into the pest species, but particularly I'm interested in endangered ones, as for example is a charismatic and one of the most endangered European cerambicid, Rosalia alpina. Nevertheless, I'm still fascinated by the vibrations, and thus I was wondering, or I decided to combine my interests and look for interactions between vibrations and other signaling modalities in insects. So I will now briefly present only a few examples of some interesting interactions between vibrations and other signaling modalities, and maybe the ones that were a little bit less discussed already. But just for a few introduction words, just a few words about multimodalities, even though we heard quite a lot about it already in yesterday's very interesting and very inspiring talks yesterday and today's already. Animals communicate in a really complex environment and are involved in intraspecific and interspecific interactions, and thus they require communication and signals that are transmitted via two or even more signaling modalities, and that is the multimodal communication. And as already heard yesterday and today, there are large numbers of taxa that use the multimodal communications, and a lot of the studies came specifically from the spiderworts. I mean, looking at the arthropod group. But the multimodal signals can be classified as fixed or as free multimodal signals. In the case of fixed, as it is common, for example, in primates and in frogs, during vocalization, they also produce these inherently connected and conspicuous visual signals, such as moving of the mouth, the lips, and in case of the frogs, exciting their egg sac. Probably there are, I mean, over and over again we are wondering why do animals use these multimodal signals, and again a lot of explanation has been already given. Presumably adding the modalities of the communication would increase the metabolic costs and the parasitism risk or predatory risk, but still multimodal signals were shown to be very beneficial in different environments, and the classical framework of multimodal divides them in redundant and non-redundant signals, depending whether they carry the same or different information, or whether they provoke the same or a different response in the receiver as well. But as we already heard from yesterday's talks, that more recent hypotheses suggested that multimodal component can convey information about the signaler, their location, species or sex identity, their quality. Moreover, they can increase the efficiency of the signal processing, and this is probably very beneficial in the noisy environments because animals can shift from one modality from one more noisy modality to a less noisy modality. And specifically when with this very wide anthropogenic noise, either concerning chemical pollution, light pollution, or acoustic pollution, this communication or multimodal communication in noisy environment is being increasingly studied. The last hypothesis is that multimodal components can facilitate the perception of specific component. They can interact with each other, these components, and for example, they can modulate each other, or for example, they can modulate the production of another signal, or one signal can modulate the response to this other modality in the receiver. And already was shown also from nice talks of yesterday, the most conspicuous and most known and studied multimodal signals are probably the dances, the visual colorations, and singing of the birds and frogs. And as already mentioned, for example, from the arthropods, crustaceans and spiders are being extensively studied, but insects maybe less, still a little bit less. Anyway, as already said, that we heard quite a few very interesting and, as I said, inspiring systems about vibroacoustic systems. It's not surprising that vibrations and sound are so often combined in insects, because the production, the detection, and the process of vibration and sound are related and thus also functionally coupled. But as I said, it was it was heard about this interesting vibroacoustic system, so I will maybe present another type of interactions between visual signals and vibrations that I found interesting, since a lot of insects also use visual signals. They move their body parts, for example, wings, legs, abdomen, or antennae, and sometimes by doing these visual movements, they would also independently produce the signals that are induced in the substrates, that is the vibrational signals. And this is the example from the pygmy grasshoppers. Genus Tetrix males produce several types of vibrational signals, and one of which is also by tremulation or body shaking. And these vibrations are accompanied by this really conspicuous visual signaling that is called pronotal bobbing. This is composed of high amplitude movement of the hind legs and the pronotum. But in this case, it's not clear whether these independently produced vibrations and visual signals is a part of a multi or function as a multimodal signals, even though they are closely related in time. And moreover, for example, it is not really known that maybe also this pronotal bobbing simultaneously also induce the vibrations in the substrate, because it's really of high amplitude and high intensity. Another interesting interactions between visual and visual signal and vibrations were shown from the scorpion flies. In general, the scorpion flies would wave their wings during copulation or in male-male competition, or also when looking for food sources protection of the food sources. And it was shown that not only the wing flagging visual displays is present in the scorpion flies, but also the abdomen shaking is present, and this abdomen vibration, of course, produces the substrates in the substrate-borne vibrations. Interestingly, the abdomen is also colored red. So Hartbauer and co-workers suggested that this vibrational signal produced by abdomen shaking is a fixed element to the corresponding visual display of this moving of the abdomen that is colored red. And what I'm specifically interested in the interactions between vibrations and chemicals, pheromones, and a little bit was already said in Andre's talk this morning. Sting bugs produce pheromones for long-range communication and location, and then they produce the vibrations when they're in close range. And Miklas and co-workers showed that these vibrations of females influence the male pheromone production. As you can see on the upper graph, when males were stimulated by a female calling song of the same, specifically of the same population, the number of males producing or emitting the pheromone increased. Moreover, when they were looking at the amount of pheromone produced by specific individual, they also observed that when they were stimulated by female calling songs, the individuals produce more of the pheromone. And interestingly, when they were stimulated by male rivalry song, the amount or the quantity of the pheromone didn't change, but they found the difference even in the pheromone composition. Because their pheromone is combined from different components, and the ratio of the components after they were stimulated changed with male rivalry song. And on the other hand, as you can see on in these last bars, the production of pheromone didn't change when males were stimulated with artificial or white noise. A similar positive feedback between chemicals and vibrations were detected also or demonstrated also from termites. They, as you probably all know, when they are in distress or in danger, they would produce alarm pheromone, and it was observed that both soldiers and workers, when they detect the pheromone of other colony members, they started to produce, or they become more vibratory active, either in body shaking or also in drumming. As you can see at these last charts, bars, in any case, when the soldiers and the workers were exposed to extracts that contain alarm pheromone, exhibited higher vibratory intensity. And moreover, this response was shown to be dose-dependent. That means that if the soldiers and the workers were exposed to lower doses equivalent to 2 pheromone equivalents, then the vibratory activity would increase and the running speed would decrease. And when the soldiers and the workers would be exposed to higher doses of pheromones, their vibratory activity would decrease and the running speed would increase. In both cases, I forgot to mention here, in the example of sting bugs, probably this modulation of the pheromone production is important because of the decrease of the metabolic cost when they are producing pheromones, and also they decrease the parasitism risk. And also in this case, it's beneficial for colony members to to react according to the type of the danger or the amount of the danger of the risk that is present in the vicinity. With this really quick look within the insects and vibrational communication, I presented only, like I said, only a few examples of bimodal interactions, but of course we all know that insects would use more than 2 modalities, and one of the best studied examples are probably the fruit flies, in which they just recently, also a member of the present audience were part of these studies, show that also the vibrational communication play a very important part in that multimodal communication. Again, not to mention the social insects, bees, ants, wasps, they also really use even more complex and more elaborate communication system in incorporating all different kinds of multimodal signals in order to survive and to organize within the colony. So all in all, I would say that probably examples in insects that use only vibrations, like Auchenorrhyncha, for example, for which for the time being is assumed that mainly they use or exclusively they use vibrational signals, is probably or are probably uncommon in the within the insect taxa. And in my future work, I would really be interested in looking specifically in the potential interactions of vibrations and chemicals within the flightless or wingless species of cerambicids, because some preliminary experiments indicates that they might also use vibrations when they are in closer contact, and of course there are increasing number of studies that they use within the whole subfamily, the pheromones. And I'm particularly interested in how this knowledge on the multimodality can help either manage insects, so thus I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's section. And more particularly, I'm also interested how to use this knowledge on multimodality to conserve, or in the sense of the conservation of this great insect biodiversity that I just, I don't know, pico or nano parts of it is just produced here and from my last field trip. Thank you for your attention.